Namaste. The soul evolving in the cosmos has been our theme recently. We wanted to look more at this chapter, Man and the Evolution, and the stages through which humanity and the individual human soul progress as we arc upwards towards manifesting a new consciousness beyond mind. For we see that evolution continues beyond the summit of mentality. There were a number of citations from Vedic and Vedantic sources ahead of this chapter, and I thought we'd take one. I think part of it we looked at last week. Let's do it again. This is from the Mundaka Upanishad, the third section, third chapter, if you wish, second section, verses 4, 5, 6, in part. This self cannot be won by any who is without strength, balahinena, nor with error in the seeking, vapyalingat, nor by an eschasis without the true mark, brahmadat tapaso. When one strives by these means and has the knowledge, in him this spirit, Atma, enters into its supreme status, Brahmadhama. Satisfied in knowledge, having built up their spiritual being, the wise, in union with the spiritual self, reach the omnipresent everywhere and enter into the all, made certain of the meaning of the highest spiritual knowledge, purified in their being. So this speaks to us, if we see with the fullest vision, that by applying oneself with strength, with endurance, with steady application, tapasya, with strength, bala, without missing the mark, without being distracted, we can attain not only the spiritual awareness of that which is beyond time, beyond its borders, spaceless, infinite, free, sheer in its being and consciousness, but also realize the omnipresent everywhere, that the all, sarvam, is throughout this cosmos of representation of that one being. And that is the highest spiritual knowledge. Not simply transcendence, but recognizing it here as well. And this is in the Mundaka Upanishad, not one of the earliest. And they like to say, Vedantists, that this is the Upanishad of the razor, because perhaps it's connoting that you have to renounce the world. You shave your head. You discern between this and that, etc. But it could mean that you are walking on the edge of that razor and getting to the actual experiences which are your destination if you take up these practices. Not one experience only, because it is distinguishable, isn't it, to realize the essential, and then to realize that which flows from the essential, that which manifests, stands out, takes its potentiality and renders it into actuality. So what can we do in achieving an entire consciousness, but reconstruct the unity from which all of these stages of being came? To that, as we rediscover and place one on top of the other, is what we name as evolution. Because it's a continuum. It is a self-finding that abandons nothing in the finding of self. So this chapter would lead us to the concept of evolution to and beyond the intellect. And we note from the very start, when we can confirm this in our own practice, that evolution, development, is not seamless, nor continuous, nor suddenly revelatory. Preparatory steps prepare the large and rapid advances that we sometimes achieve. The big leaps do occasionally come, but at each grade of advance, we may take the leading feature of our personality structure to be the seat of the soul, the real person, and always the reality is deeper. We may fashion a picture of ourselves as the mighty person, an unconquerable spirit of power, and live from the prana that's invested in us. That is a truth. It is not the absolute truth. The reality is deeper. The Taittiriya's episode with son and father illustrated that. You remember it. And not simply the placing of step upon step and the lifting of our consciousness personally, but also to recognize that the reality is vaster. The individual represents the cosmos, and the cosmos demands attention. We must see that this too is an expanse of unrecognized divinity, just as our personal territory is not often, frequently founded upon our recognition of divinity. So it's a slow pace and much to be discovered in this process of evolution. But the slow pace prepares the eventual and the ultimate emergence of these things which are in us. And so the process is not really dilatory. It's not late. It's not lagging. We're impatient from the mind's perspective because we have a sense of where we're going. But we don't perceive the inner process and recognize that there is much binding work to be done inside of us to make possible that next advance. We want to race forward. Naturally we do. But the pressure from within educes unnoticed powers to come forward when there is a well-set basis, when we have done our homework, so to speak. And they come forward and begin to flower when we are ready for them. We become increasingly aware inside, and we must communicate these discovered powers of self to the instrumental nature. If we don't correlate them with our nature at every level, including the subliminal, We must become aware of our inner reaches and tether it closely to this emerging soul presence, which then leans into the outer personality and the instrumental nature that we all know and love. When we have done that, then we take a fresh step in evolution. So we must become increasingly aware inside. And we have to communicate that discovered self to the instrumental nature. So, a long process. Sorrows, amazements, losses and victories are all necessary. And that's just part of the ordinary machinery. The evolutionary quest beyond the attained human level demands even more. And we are called, we feel the call to that from which we came, to rediscover our spiritual nature, our conscious origin. And so to attain that, we can't rest satisfied with the gross identification of self with the instrumental nature, whether it's body, whether it's life, whether it's mind, or all of them implicated in us. We must distinguish the soul from the body. And then distinguish the soul from the powers of life. Then from the mind, which would confine and dictate from its limited knowledge what the world must be and where we would be going in a development. The universe does not behave according to mental strictures. The mind is an element of the universal nature, not its boss. And apart from this necessary distinction from our inmost soul, from our outer nature, even from our inner nature, there is the ego, which is always fascinated with itself. And the ego feigns to be central at every phase of our developing being. So there is a physical ego, a vital ego, a mental ego, a general sense of what we are, but we have not to accept its orientation, but discover instead, by deep investment and constant practice, the real soul. We must discover it. And then what Sri Aurobindo calls a double evolution can occur. An evolution where we reclaim our inner nature, but also claim the outer nature, because both are necessary. We can't simply have this be an inner conquest to discover and rest satisfied with the felicity of the inmost being. We have to be able to bring that felicity to the front of our nature. It must stand forth in our nature and become the prominent presence in mind, life, and body, which means that first, in discovering the soul, we have to bring it into a gladdening work inside of our subliminal being. And then it has to lean from that into the outer being. But these are, again, not definable phases. This begins on Monday, this continues on Wednesday, and this concludes on Friday. This is a very changeable enterprise according to the nature of the individual. It will move according to what the Mahashakti sees is possible it will move. But it moves not simply in us, but there is, as an individual makes progress, a general possibility for a larger progress for that portion of humanity in touch with this evolving soul, this opening, this flowering spirit. And why, again, we note in brackets, it's so important for the individual to be engaged in collective life. Not to mistake what has been achieved in the doings of a collective enterprise, but that there be the presence of the soul satisfaction at the center of it. So, it is necessary then to distinguish the soul. And for that, our aspiration has to be keen. Sri Aurobindo notes that in this chapter, just as he does in his book, The Mother. Without aspiration, nothing will be done. We must aspire to know what we really are. We must aspire to live from the center of our psychic self. We must know what is beyond. What is beyond the compass of nature? What is that which is extracosmic? What is that as an absolute from which all of this comes? To acquire the unmoving quietude and peace of the self that is both beyond the cosmos and immersive in the cosmos, supporting it, sustaining it, as if the worlds were all floating in this beatific ocean of conscious being. It is a spiritual experience confirming a truth that philosophy likes to frame. In advance, we have to culture the mind as the leading aspect of our nature, because that's where we've evolved to right now. Mind is the leader of the body and the life. We have to cultivate the mind to encourage and encompass all of these, in a sense, to become not simply familiar with the ideas, but to make these vivifying, sustaining realities in our inner experience. Otherwise, that isn't captured for the instrumental evolution, and that work will have to be attended to later. So we have to find the soul, live in the spirit, and make both of them present, conscious stations of our action in the instrumental nature and in the instrumental evolution. We need both, soul and spirit, psyche and self. It is true, Sri Aurobindo writes, that it is difficult for a man's mind to distinguish entirely the soul or self or any spiritual element in him from the mental and vital formation in which it makes its appearance. But that is only so long as the emergence is not complete. End quote. He's telling us that we're going to falsely identify parts of our personality as being core to the soul, core to the self, when it won't be true. So we'll have to forgive ourselves and step beyond what we thought was an early victory to get the greater victory. We'll have to leave it behind. We pass from realization to greater realization, or from premature discovery to real discovery. So to distinguish the elements of the instrument, mind, life, body, the adhara, from the soul is not quick. Sri Aurobindo writes again, the mental human being is not aware of a soul in him, standing back from mind and life and body, detaching itself, seeing and controlling and molding their action and formation. But as the inner evolution proceeds, this is precisely what can, must, and does happen. It is the long-delayed but inevitable next step in our evolutionary destiny. There can be a decisive emergence in which the being separates itself from thought and sees itself in an inner silence as the spirit in mind, or separates itself from the life movements, desires, sensations, kinetic impulses, and is aware of itself as the spirit supporting life, or separates itself from the body sense and knows itself as a spirit ensouling matter. This is the discovery of ourselves as the Purusha, a mental being or a life soul or a subtle self supporting the body. And this represents, well, that's the end of the quote, and this represents to the mind a first reality of the self. More to be said about that, because this is an early liberation sense, a liberation from identity with the gross and subtle nature, but it isn't itself all that is possible. He says a few lines later, when there is the decisive emergence, one side of it is the status or action in us of an inherent, intrinsic, self-existent consciousness which knows itself by the mere fact of being, knows all that is in itself in the same way, by identity with it. This is the real self. Returning to the process then, mark that the instrumental nature can't keep pace with all the possible inner advances because they come too quickly, and then they have to be absorbed, digested before they can be fresh advance. So unwelcome setbacks occur, and the whole process entails difficulties, suffering, and simply takes time. And that's if we want to change, let alone if we're moving according to nature's clock. This is if the soul in us is awakening and wants things to speed up. So it sees the heaven in front of it, if you will, and wants to attain it. So there are reversals and stalls and betrayals aplenty. How to cut to the chase. Sri Aurobindo accords a certain value and place to asceticism here, because asceticism permits the inner focus and divorces our attention from external distractions and denies the instrumental framework the necessary favors which make the full evolutionary stride a genuine and lasting achievement. So that last part, where it's diminishing, giving blessings to the instrumental nature, is not what we love most about asceticism. That's the part we don't like about asceticism. What we like about asceticism is that it permits us not to identify with the nature in front. It makes the distinction between Purusha and Prakriti genuine. It makes it a realization. And we note that this distinction is only the first of several spiritual revelations which need to succeed upon the other to have a full appreciation of what is spirit and what is nature and how spirit is in nature. With Sri Aurobindo, we have frequently seen that evolving nature has pushed the awakening beyond the individual's evolution into one where there is a measurable advance for human civilization and attained from several sides, which we as individuals participate in. But these are larger constructions or fields of enterprise that an individual alone could comprise or invent. The inner soul of a person and society could be empowered to emerge from these four things: religion, occultism, spiritual thought, and finally, the actual realization when spirit becomes, so to say, a concrete reality to us, when it becomes our true identity, displacing the shielding or the masking ego. So we'll have more chance to look at this. I don't think that we can finish everything that we might have approached tonight because it's a big topic, but let's at least get a lengthy quote from Sri Aurobindo here, which offers a context from which we can build. And if you want to find this, look on pages 892 and 893 in the Collected Works of Sri Aurobindo version of the Life Divine. And he says, there are four main lines which nature has followed in her attempt to open up the inner being: religion, occultism, spiritual thought, and an inner spiritual realization and experience. The three first are approaches. The last is the decisive avenue of entry. All these four powers have worked by a simultaneous action, more or less connected, sometimes in a variable collaboration, sometimes in dispute with each other, sometimes in a separate independence. Religion has admitted an occult element in its ritual, ceremony, sacraments. It has leaned upon spiritual thinking, deriving from it sometimes a creed or theology. Sometimes it's supporting spiritual philosophy. The former ordinarily is the Occidental method, the latter the Oriental. But spiritual experience is the final aim and achievement of religion. Its sky and summit. But also, religion has sometimes banned occultism or reduced its own occult element to a minimum. It has pushed away the philosophic mind as a dry intellectual alien, leaned with all its weight on creed and dogma, pietistic emotion and fervor, and moral conduct. It has reduced to a minimum or dispensed with spiritual realization and experience. Occultism has sometimes put forward a spiritual aim as its goal and followed occult knowledge and experience as an approach to it, formulated some kind of mystic philosophy, but more often it has confined itself to occult knowledge and practice without any spiritual vistas. It has turned to thaumaturgy or mere magic, or even deviated into diabolism. Spiritual philosophy has very usually leaned on religion as its support or its way to experience. It has been the outcome of realization and experience, or built its structures as an approach to it. But it has also rejected all aid or all impediment of religion and proceeded in its own strength, either satisfied with mental knowledge or confident to discover its own path of experience and effective discipline. Spiritual experience has used all the three means as a starting point, but it has also dispensed with them all, relying on its own pure strength. Discouraging occult knowledge and powers as dangerous lures and entangling obstacles, it has sought only the pure truth of the Spirit. Dispensing with philosophy, it has arrived instead through the heart's fervor or a mystic inward spiritualization, putting behind it all religious creed, worship, and practice, and regarding them as an inferior stage or first approach. It has passed on, leaving behind it all these supports, nude of all these trappings, to the sheer contact of the spiritual reality. All these variations were necessary. The evolutionary endeavor of nature has experimented on all lines in order to find her true way and her whole way towards the supreme consciousness and the integral knowledge. End of quote. We've often mistaken deep emotion or mental activity or acuity for soul or soul powers. Thought does not reveal. In the air of a mental silence, we see with a sight that is beyond mental vision. But this is the self. And we must distinguish this universally real existence from the individual formation, which is soul, psyche. We must know both. We cannot confuse them. Confused at this level, where we stand in the realm of thought, we are even more confused with the immixture of emotion and thought with our physicality, shot through with psychic threads. We don't know what is what. And this all apart from the numerous temptations which could lure us as we travel on a route that we hope is sunlit and golden towards a sublime realization. Again, one process helps in sharpening this discrimination: the power to step back from identification and through disidentification to know, until, having distinguished self from all these parts of our being, we sit in our real self, the self of the psyche, the self of the Supreme. As we noted already, that would be the utility of asceticism, to break the more obvious chains and deliver us into a spiritual reality. It's getting to that reality, which is our desideratum. That's our goal. But it is not the renunciation of life or the existence common to us in the universe that we seek. The grand unification of all, as noted above in the Mundaka Upanishad at the start of our meeting, that we should attain. And until we've attained it, our lives are incomplete, our chain of evolution is not fulfilled. So I think I've taken a sufficient time. Shall I turn to Savitri, those of you who are still awake? Let us see. I think I had a thought to go to page 37, still Book 1, Canto 3, The Yoga of the Soul's Release. And I'm going to skip a few lines down from what you might think would be the obvious place to begin. And we're going to start here. But there too, in the uncertain shadow of life, there was a labor and a fiery breath. The ambiguous, cowled, celestial puissance worked, watched by the inner witness's moveless peace. Even on the struggling nature left below, strong periods of illumination came. Lightnings of glory after glory burned. Experience was a tale of blaze and fire. Air rippled round the argosies of the guns. Strange riches sailed to him from the unseen. Splendors of insight filled the blank of thought. Knowledge spoke to the inconscient stillnesses. Rivers poured down of bliss and luminous forms. Visits of beauty, storm sweeps of delight, rain from the all-powerful mystery above. Then stooped the eagles of omniscience. A dense veil was rent, a mighty whisper heard. Repeated in the privacy of his soul, a wisdom cry from rapt transcendences sang on the mountains of an unseen world. The voices that an inner listening hears conveyed to him their prophet utterances and flame-wrapped outbursts of the immortal word and flashes of an occult revealing light approached him from the unreachable secrecy. An inspired knowledge sat enthroned within, whose seconds illumined more than reason's years. An ictus of revealing luster fell, as if a pointing accent upon truth, and like a sky flare showing all the ground, a swift intuitive discernment shone. One glance could separate the true and false, or raise its rapid torch fire in the dark, to check the claimants crowding through mind's gates, covered by the forged signatures of the gods. Detect the magic bride in her disguise, or scan the apparent face of thought and life. Well, You are kind to permit me to croak at you with the frog-like voices that the Vedic rishis were supposed to have had after they had drunk the soma. There is no soma in liquid form in this room with me. Soma is here. I hope you are well. You look well to me, those of you whom I discern. Much love to you all, discerned or not. Invited always, and we shall see you again. Stay well. Do perfect work. Please the gods. Please the Mother. Namaste. Jai Ma.